I've spent my life climbing and trekking in the mountains of the world, and in November 2023 I hiked to Everest Base Camp on the south side via the Cholar Pass at over 5,400 meters. And so in this film I want to share with you what I learned and discovered and give you my 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp. But I think it's just worth to mention that this is my personal experience. It's the things that I learned and that I discovered. It's not based on facts. So please do hit that like and subscribe button. There's lots more content on this channel to come. So let's get cracking now on my 10 top tips when it comes to trekking to Everest Base Camp. So what item is number 10 on my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp? And I'm laughing because it's quite a strange thing to include on the list, because it's toilet roll. Toilet roll is an essential item when trekking to Everest Base Camp. And you might ask why? Well, not to state the obvious, but these things become like gold dust. You know, you can almost do barter deals with other trekkers, because north of Namche Bazaar, they are expensive. The most I paid for a toilet roll was $10 US, because at the end of the day, when you need to go, boy, do you need to go. So my advice would be to obviously bring a couple of rolls with you on your journey from wherever you're coming from, but also you can source them in Kathmandu and you can source them in Namche Bazaar, because they are a pretty essential item to have with you on your top 10 list. So number 9 on my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp is power, because you know, we all are carrying things in our pockets that are hungry for it, whether it's your smartphone or even, for example, the DJI Action 4 camera that I'm using at the moment and that I used on the trip. All requires power. Now, there's two ways that you could charge. The first is you can use, you know, lodges and even some tented villages where you can plug in and charge all of your devices. But some lodges charge up to $5 US for one charge of a mobile phone. So another solution, and in fact the solution that I used on my trip, was that I used a solar panel. And I bought one from a company called Sun Slice. And I'll place a link in the description, because for that one solar panel, I was able to charge all of my devices, and I had a lot of them, for my entire trip. So taking a solar panel with you is highly, highly recommended. And that's why it's number 9 on my top 10 tips. So number 8 on my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp is, for me, one of the most essential items on my personal list. And that is walking or trekking poles. Because I remember once I read that if you were to do an 8-hour hike by using 2 poles, that will take an equivalent of 20 tons of pressure off of your knees. And certainly when you trek to Everest Base Camp, with the amount of ascent and descent, that is a lot of stress that you're relieving. The other reason for using a trekking or walking pole is that it obviously increases stability, reducing the risk of tripping over and twisting your ankle, and also it actually helps to keep your body upright, which aids breathing. So for me, trekking or walking poles are a huge essential item, and that's why I'm placing them number 8 on my top 10 tips. So number 7 on my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp is bring lots of cash, because we all know that global prices have soared everywhere in the last couple of years, and unfortunately Nepal is no exception. And during my 1 month long trip, I probably spent about $500 US, and you pretty much do need physical cash. There are places where you can pay digitally, but they are few and far between. So cash is definitely king. And the type of things that you can expect to spend it on are things obviously like food and drinks, teas and coffees, but also perhaps souvenirs, charging your mobile phone, buying that toilet roll, taking a hot shower. All these kind of things need cash for payment. And I would also recommend taking some extra cash, probably about $100 to give to your Sherpas as tips, because they are the ones that have done all the hard work and they're the ones that have probably carried your bag. So I'd probably allow about $100 also for that. But definitely cash is an essential part, and that's why it's number 7 on my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp. So number 6 on my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp is connectivity and Wi-Fi. Because I remember the last time I went there was 10 years ago when I went to Ahmedabad, and then there was zero Wi-Fi connectivity and zero cellular connection. But boy, things have changed. So what I suggest is that when you exit Kathmandu Airport, there are loads of little shops that are selling a local SIM card. And I paid about $10, and that gave me, I think, about 20 gigabytes of data. To get this local SIM card, you do need, however, to provide a passport photo. I don't know why, but you do. You give your money and your photo to the guy, and he taps and touches your phone, turns off your international SIM and installs your SIM. And the whole process is very quick. It takes about 5 minutes. But one word of advice, although the guy really knows what he's doing when turning off your international data, I highly recommend that you double check, because the last thing you want is like a $500 phone bill when you get home because your international roaming data was turned on. So purchasing a local SIM is really, really essential. Make sure that your international data is turned off, as I just mentioned, but it's a real asset. And pretty much you'll get roughly, give or take, probably about 80% connectivity throughout your entire trek. Certainly south of Namche Bazaar, the connectivity is really good. North of Namche Bazaar, connectivity is a little bit sketchy. But then, of course, you can use the local Wi-Fi's provided in the lodges, and that can cost anything between $5 and $10. But then, of course, there is this question: do you want to be connected to the outside world? You know, there is something special about being away from everything else. I did, however, take with me a satellite phone, my own personal satellite phone, but to be honest, apart from just a gimmick call to say that I was at Everest Base Camp, I didn't need it. Whereas 10 years ago, it was essential if I wanted to communicate to the outside world. So connectivity and Wi-Fi is definitely number 6 on my top 10 tips. We're nearly halfway through my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp. And number 5 on my list is weather and temperature. Because guess what? If you were telling a friend that you were trekking to Everest Base Camp, the first thing they'd probably say is, oh my God, that's going to be really, really cold. Well, of course, yeah, it will be cold. It's a high altitude mountain environment. But actually, we experience temperatures as low as about -10. And if you add on the wind, then you're going to get a wind chill factor a few degrees Celsius below that on top. So probably round about the -15 Celsius level. Now, definitely clothing is an essential item when it comes to trekking to Everest Base Camp. So much so that I'm going to do a separate video about the type of things that I decided to take with me on my trek. And I'm going to do a separate film about that, like I just said. So please subscribe and stay tuned to my channel and watch out for that one. The other thing you have to consider, as well as the cold, is the heat. You know, sometimes we had temperatures of around about 21, 22 degrees Celsius, especially when the sun came out. So you really do need a mixed bag of clothing when undertaking this kind of trek. I mean, you'll have seen in some of my shots, I was down to wearing a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. It was that warm. And also another very, very important consideration is the solar radiation beating down upon you. So obviously having some kind of head covering, especially for someone like me, is absolutely essential, and something covering your neck as well, but also wearing very, very effective sunblock. Now, I personally, although they didn't endorse this video, I use a brand called P20, and I find that really works well for me. You put one application, it lasts all day, and it doesn't leave a sticky, slimy residue over your hands to get over your clothing or over your mobile phone. It's a really great sun cream. The other thing, of course, you need to take is lots and lots of sunblock lip balm to protect those lips, also from the wind and the dry atmosphere. And that's why weather and temperature sits at number 5 on my top 10 tips. So number 4 on my top 10 tips for trekking to Everest Base Camp, and it's quite a funny one to have on my list talking as adults, is that you need to go to bed early. Why? Because sleeping at altitude can be a bit tricky. The reason because your heart rate is so much higher, and it's quite difficult to kind of wind down when your heart rate is like 100 beats per minute. So you need to get as much physical rest as possible. Even if you're not in a deep sleep, at least you're lying down, relaxing your muscles, and just kind of getting your energy back for the next day. And to do that, because you will be up early, 6 o'clock in the morning, ready for your next day, to do that, you need to be kind of in your sleeping bag by around about 8 o'clock, excuse me, around about 8 o'clock at night. Now I know that seems ridiculously early, but believe me, if you've been spending 10 hours trekking, getting in your nice, warm, cozy sleeping bag at 8 o'clock at night isn't a bad thing. And at least then your body is relaxing, resting, and healing for the next day's adventure. So going to bed nice and early is a really important thing, and that's why I've put it at number 4 on my top 10 tips for trekking to Everest Base Camp. So we're getting down to the last top 3 of my top 10 tips when trekking to Everest Base Camp. And number 3 is a really important consideration, and that's training. How much training should a person do when trekking to Everest Base Camp? And there isn't a right or wrong answer. And of course, there are so many other factors, like depending on your own base level of fitness and where you live in the world and what your job is. But one thing I would say, and that's you need to do a lot. The best way to train to walk to Everest Base Camp is to walk. Go out for some really long hikes, wear a pack of about 10 kilos, really go for those long distance walks. Now, unfortunately, I live in the Netherlands, although obviously I'm from the UK, and training in the Netherlands is a little bit of a joke. I live in the most flattest and geologically boring country in the world. There are no hills, and there certainly are no mountains to go and do any kind of trekking on. But still, I did spend a lot of time walking, although it be on the flat, with about 10 kilos on my pack. And also, of course, general cycling or swimming or going to a gym and doing classes are really an important part of your physical condition. I did say to my friends who came with me on my trip, training makes a difference between just surviving and doing it and enjoying it. Because at the end of the day, you want to enjoy your experience. And so being in a reasonably good physical condition will mean that you will thrive and you'll get the most out of your amazing experience to trek to Everest Base Camp. So I would say training is one of the most important considerations when undertaking such an adventure. And that's why I decided to put it at number 3 on my top 10 tips, when trekking to Everest Base Camp. So we're nearly there on my top 10 tips for trekking at Everest Base Camp, because we're at number 2. And number 2 is a really important one, and that's acclimatisation. Acclimatisation is basically when you allow your body to adapt to the higher altitudes that you will experience as you trek towards Everest Base Camp. You will be at an altitude of around about 5,200, 5,300 meters. And for that, your body needs to acclimatise. It basically needs to produce more red blood cells. Now, the way that you do that is that the body does it for itself by spending nights sleeping at altitude. Over a period of time, over about a couple of weeks, your body produces more red blood cells that transports more oxygen throughout your system. And that is a natural way to acclimatise. Now, I'm going to try and talk about diamox because I heard the word diamox so many times during my trip. The first thing I will say is that I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, and that taking or not taking diamox is very much a personal choice, and you should always consult a physician anyway. What diamox does is essentially it makes you pee. It helps remove excess fluids that can build up inside your body, a result of poor acclimatisation. Personally, and I emphasise the word personally, I do not, nor have I ever used it, and I have been up to just below 7,000 metres. Now, I've spoken to many professional mountaineers and very many professional mountain guides, and they really also do not recommend using it unless you're pushing the real envelope of high altitude mountaineering. Really, what you should consider is how is your body responding to being at altitude, and then making conscious, calculated decisions about that. If you don't feel well, if you have a headache that won't go away with painkillers, if you're really unable to eat, unable to sleep, feel sick, just feel generally unwell, the best advice you can do is go down. Personally, what I don't like about diamox, and this is just my personal opinion, is it is in some ways masking or delaying the symptoms of high altitude mountain sickness, and you want your body to be responding in the best way that it possibly can. So I don't use diamox, but then at the end of the day, that's your personal choice. But nonetheless, natural acclimatization for allowing more red blood cells to be generated by your body is the best way to acclimatize. Take it easy, listen to your body, drink plenty of water so that you're peeing clear, and take plenty of rest and enjoy the moment. And that's why acclimatization is a really important one, and it sits at number 2 of my top 10 tips. So here we are. What is my number 1 tip when trekking to Everest Basecamp? And I thought long and hard about what I think is the most important thing. And my conclusion is its mental attitude. You know, you can have 100 rolls of toilet roll, the best trekking poles in the world, you can have the best Wi-Fi signal, you can have thousands of Nepali or millions of Nepali rupees in your pocket, and all of those considerations you can all bring with you. You can be snug and warm and have had so much sleep. But my God, if you don't feel right in your head, you won't enjoy your hike. You have to embrace it. You have to endorse every single step that you're going to take, because sometimes you're going to think, my God, why on earth am I doing this? This is hard. This is challenging. So having the right mental attitude when undertaking your hike to Everest Base Camp can mean the difference between hating it and loving it. And that's why mental attitude I've put at number 1 on my list of tips to trek to Everest Base Camp. So there we are, job done. And just a little PS, during our entire 1 month trek, we almost saw no litter. But if you do see any litter whilst trekking, especially plastic, please do pick it up and just take it to your lodge and dispose of it there. Like I said, these were just my personal accounts, what I learned and what I discovered. But if you do have any other advice that you could share with any other viewers on my channel, please do drop a line in the comments. I'm sure the climbing and trekking community will appreciate them. Well, I guess that's pretty much it now. I hope you have enjoyed this film, and of course please do check out my actual documentary on my channel called Everest Basecamp, The Shocking Truth. And while you're there, please do give me a subscribe, because you know, I've got so much more adventure content to come on my channel, including a film about the type of gear and equipment that I chose to take on this epic adventure. So I guess I'll see you in my next film, and don't forget, please, hashtag adventure travel filmmaking. See you in the next film.